Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are from different parts of the world. We would like to welcome you in this series of webinar and welcome all for taking time out from your busy day or evening to join us in this webinar. I have with me two eminent gentlemen who can talk to us in great detail about AI and its history and future with their lifelong experience. I'm joined by David Geddam, who's a senior AI advisor at Worldwide Technology with over 30 years of experience spanning AI, healthcare tech, and enterprise solution. He's worked in Kaiser Permanente, GE Healthcare, Philips, IBM Watson Imaging, and a lot of startups that he has worked over the last 30 years. Again, it's not just at office that he serves, but he's also an avid tennis player who serves in the court. And to join him, we have Sivakumar SK, who's the CEO of Triassic Solutions, who is an entrepreneur, a futurist, and an angel investor who has spent 2 decades building mission critical systems across industries. Under his leadership, Triassic has become a pioneer in applied AI, bridging the gap between practical implementation and futuristic innovation. We have a 30-minute power pack session, and I would like to have the questions being asked in the chat as we go along, and we'll have them addressed towards the end of this meeting. Thank you again for joining this webinar. Sivakumar, over to you.
Thanks, Ranish, for the introduction. Good morning, David. Thanks for being in this webinar. For the audience, David is no stranger to us. He has worked with us for the past 15 years in multiple startups. He has been the CTO for a couple of major startups, and those startups, one of them including hardware, software, FDA-cleared product, which is out in the market right now, and the other one, a software technology platform, again for healthcare. So when we first thought of conducting a webinar in AI, the first person that came to our mind was you, David. So welcome to the show. So how do you want to take it forward?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Sivakumar and Ranish, for your introduction. So I'm excited to really talk about where kind of AI is heading. But before we head there, the first aspect of where I want to kind of focus on is how was the environment pre-AI, right? Like, how did things work in the healthcare space? Pre-AI, I'm talking maybe from 2015 to 2020, maybe that's the time frame. And I think, as all of you know, you probably heard of Epic, Cerner on the healthcare EHR side. You've seen the pharma, where early drug discovery is happening, in the surgical space, and also in the workforce space, which hardly gets mentioned, but it's a key aspect of where AI is really starting to improve. So when you talk about the legacy side of AI or pre-AI, really you're talking about solutions, clinical decision support systems that use a much more rule-based. It was very logical, so there's not much flexibility to the rules. So you had a rule-making process like blood pressure alerts or your rhythm alerts, things of that nature that were not flexible, right? And if you look at pharma, for example, early molecular modeling, which now you'll see as molecular modeling that is much more GAN based, and also just using basic AI to discover drugs that could be used for other therapies where there were no drugs available. In surgical, non-autonomous decision making, so human-controlled robots like Da Vinci robots. And then in the workforce, you probably heard of robotic process automation, pre-AI, where a lot of billing, claims processing, things of that nature, where text was extracted out and then that were kind of pushed into claims. So I think that's where, Sukumar, I think the legacy AI was, and maybe you can share a little bit about what you're thinking as to these areas that I mentioned.
Yeah, before I mention anything else, I would like to mention that pre-AI, even pre-AI, you were working in AI for like precision mapping and
Yeah,
few other areas. That
yeah,
time, that hype was not there. So
yeah,
you have worked exhaustively pre-AI, and
yeah,
it was during like after 2015, 17 that AI buzz came in, and people
yeah,
was all in that bandwagon.
yeah.
Initially, it was all like, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you brought that up. I think my journey has been very interesting, right? Working at G Healthcare in cardiology space, picture archival, a lot of pre-AI, but neural networks were involved, especially in classification of ECG signals, GE, especially, I don't know if many of you remember, but Marquette Medical, which is based in Wisconsin, was a leader in ECG and patient monitoring, and they had a neural network model used for 12 lead ECG classification very, very early on. And it would just print out the things. And it's amazing where the AI is today compared to back then. But there was a lot of pre-AI, but the compute is also an important thing to mention. The compute advancements at Nvidia, especially now, you probably hear of Blackwell and things of that nature, where extremely high parallel processing capabilities available, whereas back in 2010 and 2000, pre-2000, that was not the case.
Right.
Compute was very, very limited. And so that's where the advancement also comes in. One of the key turning points for NVIDIA was the AlexNet, where they use computer vision. The Canadian researchers use that to help bring about the GPU as a mechanism for AI. That was not where NVIDIA started. They started with video graphics, right? So I think that's very, very interesting to see that process.
Right. I remember you setting up machines in your office for AI.
Yeah,
Like this was pre-cloud days,
yeah, yeah,
where that compute was limited. We have to buy costly hardware and then put up
yeah,
all those systems.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
right.
I think that's one of the things that really has shifted, especially, you had the pre-cloud, yeah, and you had the cloud between 2008 till about 2022. Cloud is still there,
Hmm.
but I think you're slowly starting to see GPU starting to take over in terms of the compute facility. Data centers, you can see all these energy requirements, massive data center, networking requirements. So the game has significantly shifted, and also an important topic that I think sovereign cloud systems that are specific to countries and things of that nature are also coming up. But we can talk more about that. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, David, moving on to the current trends, like entering that AI age and then entering the agentic AI age, how do you see healthcare and life science transforming? Especially these are two industries which is well regulated. It's not like a retail or finance where the adoption of new technology is easy. It's very difficult to adopt new technology. That change is very difficult. How do you see that happening here?
Yeah, I think, and for the people hearing this webinar, thank you so much for joining. But I think what I wanted to emphasize is it is such a fast-moving space, and one of the big trigger points in all of this was you probably all of you have experienced ChatGPT, right? The moment ChatGPT was announced, a massive adoption, right? Never seen before. And that was a key inflection point. And what happened is it brought the AI to the masses. That's how I see it. People really started to play with AI because there was an interface that happened between the regular crowd that didn't understand AI. It was a scientific approach to now I can ask it any question. It is my advisor. It is my friend, you know. And so that's kind of where things started to move. And one of the areas, at least in the healthcare space, is the GPT-4 being used in the radiology reports for clinical summarization. Not only that, I think it's gone from just text-based extraction to multimodal, right? It can understand pictures, it can understand graphs, it can see an image, and it can focus on a cancer lesion. So I think it's very, very interesting how the clinical side of it is so much more advanced. You also heard of Abridge that does ambient listening it's massively being adopted at Kaiser, where they run the mobile app with the Abridge system, and it listens to the conversation between the physician and the patient, and it summarizes the notes. So it's a massive improvement in the reduction of burnout, right? That's one area in the clinical side. There's a lot of other decision support systems where AI is starting to come in. In pharma, for example, there's two companies that are important to mention, Insilico and Recursion. Both of them have advanced their generative adversarial networks, which is a transformer and a discriminator type of networks, which can learn and as well as discriminate. But the idea is to develop protein synthesis of molecules, right? You're synthesizing molecules and you're speeding that up. So what I mean by that is it used to take 10 to 15 years, a minimum of 10 to $15 billion to develop one drug.
Right.
And the idea was to bring that speed down, you know, or increase the speed, bring the time down.
Yeah.
And use generative AI to really, really emphasize the learnings of how this molecule synthesis, how can it bind with certain protein structures, where is the binding sites, all of that information. Think about it this way, a person, whether you're a clinical researcher, you have been trained over 15 years to learn all of this and use and apply that into your research, right? Now imagine with AI, now you're having 100 researchers available at your disposal, right? That's what you're looking at. And the data and the formulations and the knowledge graphs, that's where it's really, really expanding. And, you know, there is no end to this, and it's only going to speed up. But there's also an importance in accuracy, precision, reliability of the AI. And that's where the hype versus the facts and things that get differentiated, and good AI solutions still need to be done with good engineering teams. So I want to make sure that people do understand that, right? When you look at surgical, for example, phenomenal growth there. It's gone from being passive, human-controlled, telerobotics to now semi-autonomous decision-making, right? And that means that the image guidance aspect, the segmentation of it is giving feedback to the robots, you know, whether they're touching a tissue, whether they're perforating it. We see that in the cardiac mapping. It's a big, big improvement. And also it's going more into the ambulatory centers. And so all of these electronics are now getting embedded with GPUs so that they can make real-time decisions, especially with computer vision combined with signal processing and things of that nature. And then lastly, what I would say is on the workforce side, it's also very essential, right? We have a small workforce, especially in the United States. The workforce is limited. Experts are limited. So the idea is to improve that support system for these physicians to do a better job with their surgery. The physicians and experts in the surgery will not be going away anytime soon, but the robots can definitely help with the burnout, because the number of patients, especially elderly, are going to only increase. And the likes of Boston Scientific, GE Healthcare, Medtronic, all of them have robotic surgical solutions, Stryker, Da Vinci robots. All of these companies are starting to build semi-autonomous to autonomous, robotic systems. And Nvidia with their Isaac, system, they're really, really starting to focus in on that, right? So that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, And David, what is happening on the agentic front? And also, with all these technologies coming, there are also challenges, a lot of challenges
Yeah.
that are coming, and regulatory challenges. So how do you see that?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting, right? The agentic, it's gone from when we look at AI, a lot of the times we look at the maturity of the organization before we want to emphasize. And a lot of times we tend to move into a solution before we understand the problem. And I've been sitting in a lot of these executive boards, and a lot of the times the first question is, what is your challenge, right? And it is even as simple as educating the executive teams, CEOs, CFOs, CEOs. Hey, this is what the AI can do, and this is what AI cannot do yet, right? And then also there's a big aspect of, do I want to buy? Do I want to customize? Do I want to partner? Do I want to build? And this is a constant equation, and that's all based on your budget, the speed to the market, how you want to bring it. But definitely there's a shift from generative to agentic and to physical, right? And the agentic, you probably heard of Model Context Protocol. You're hearing of A2A from Google. Obviously Model Context came from Anthropic. And then Google just released A2A, and they work very well harmoniously. You can, I did a podcast recently at Worldwide. You can check that out. We'll put that link later in the session for people to take a look at. So I think it's pretty exciting as to where the agentic is. And definitely initially, I'm seeing a lot of customer service applications, healthcare, non-healthcare, like travel, but I could see that really helping out patients when you look at a multi-ecosystem at large healthcare organizations where a lot of the time the pre-care, you have the surgical appointments, you have to get the appointments for the travel, then you had to do the post-surgery care, and agentic AI is here to help all these patients have a much more successful time at the hospital because all of them want good care. So I think that's where the agentic is going to go, at least in healthcare.
Right. I listened to your podcast. You have given some real life examples. A wonderful one. We'll share the link with the attendees so that they can also listen to it. On the regulatory framework, how do you think that is evolving? Because we are talking about ethical AI, we are talking about biases, we are talking about the responsibility, the transparency. So how is that coming along, especially when we are using agentic, which is autonomous?
Yeah, I think there's two sides of the industry, right? One where it's very, very fast paced. There's little regulation, little governance requirements, but I think the interesting thing is healthcare is a slow moving vertical compared to a lot of the other ones. It's very risk averse. Like you have a lot of FDA governance, regulatory requirements. So AI solutions and vendors that can provide governance-based approaches for regulated industry and such, that those will be successful because a lot of what healthcare looks at is security, governance, a lot of focus on cybersecurity, especially with models, and you want to make sure the models are regulated properly before being applied. Nvidia is big into having a very, very validated model set from their catalog. They have a pretty full stack all the way from the models to the blueprints to the inference services all the way down to the hardware stack, right? And even in the hardware stack, they have different ones for low latency applications versus medium versus research-based, things of that nature. So it is a pretty fast-moving, shifting space, but the essence of it is in the banking, healthcare, energy sectors, especially power, grid resiliency. You will see that governance and solutions that provide governance, change management will excel versus industries that are vendors that are not in that space will not excel. So that's a pretty up and coming space.
Okay. And what is your advice to organizations which are moving into this space, agentic AI space, how do they assess their maturity? What are the things that they need to be careful about?
Yeah, I think it's good. That's where somebody like Worldwide really provides that facility for executives to come on board, to understand it. We provide executive leadership. We provide support, strategic resourcing. But the idea is to ensure that you have a strong foundation. Without a strong foundation, everything else is kind of moot, So good data, good, strong data integrity, which is critical to the next step of applying models and using generative AI and agentic AI to then formulate the approach in a Foundry space. So you have a kind of a studio concept where you are trying to establish the ground rules, the use cases, the type of tech stacks, and then you go into a Foundry level where you're thinking about, how do I formulate this? Like what is the process? And AI engineering is very, very different from, let's say, software engineering, right? The tech stacks and the way you approach it, you have retrieval augmented generation, you have vector databases, you have your data repositories, you have legacy information sets, you have your hardware stacks, you have digital twins. So you really have to understand the space in order to be successful. And whether it is Worldwide, and there's a lot of other consulting, the first grounding of it is, how are you established today? What are your use cases? Start with something simple. Don't go with something sophisticated, because it's going to take a long time. And sometimes you're going to be unsuccessful and then you lose the track, right? So I think that's very key in how you establish. And once you do that, you apply the Foundry level where you have your machine learning ops, your AI ops, you bring in your vendor platforms, right? Databricks, your Snowflakes, you formulate the process and the way you want to scale it. What type of models do you want to use? You want to use LSTMs, you want to use RCNNs, you want to use large language models, what type of large language models, which use case. So the use case is very critical. What your ROI is very critical. And once you have that, then you look to scale, which is your AI factory. Then you talk about token economy, things of that nature. So I think I would kind of encourage that process a little bit.
Okay. Well articulated, David. And how do you see the future? What are the next steps in this?
It's just hard to tell. Being in the AI space for the last 15 years, pre-AI, but already part of AI, where it was a lot of computer vision, natural language processing, to now you're starting to have AI that really understands and connecting the dots, which is really what the real-time inferencing is starting to come in. I think the key aspects would be agentic and physical, where you'll see humanoids, robots helping in the automotive space, manufacturing space, plant managing space, to healthcare, where surgery will be semi-autonomous or autonomous. You have energy sector, where there's a lot of data acquisition. You have to manage your pipes, oil pipes, or your electric grid, a lot of sensors, IoTs. You're starting to see model context protocol gain foothold. But I think as you start to apply agentic AI into the picture, and robotic or physical AI, model context starts to become very foundational in my viewpoint. And it's going to become the brains of how AI is governed. But there's also a security element, because model context by nature is very diverse. So industries that are in high regulated space, high governance space, may require to really think through their cybersecurity framework, how they apply that, what type of encryption models, things of that nature. But yes, definitely a big change, but it's only going to get faster, in my viewpoint.
Yeah. Any areas you feel is lagging behind in healthcare or pharma? or life science?
I think drug discovery. I was reading a recent article in the New Yorker about drug discovery. It's a little bit of an art and science, you know. The science part, obviously, the AI can help, but the art part is how do you bring that formulation, that specific drug to solve for that particular patient or a group of patients for a particular treatment, right? So that's where the art comes in, and that's where the human component comes in to understand that. And still, it's the humans that drive that.
Right.
The AI can only help improve the timing of it and minimize the combinations, especially in pre-clinical trials of that nature. And so drug discovery is one place where it's still probably going to take a little bit of time. I think, you know, and then I think also in energy sectors, it's still a bit slow because of the vastness of it. But I think there are some aspects of what companies like Nvidia are doing that really are going to change the face of AI, especially with the compute power, right? And I think one thing that's critical, and I want to bring that to people's attention, is data centers that's providing this compute power. A lot of organizations are now trying to secure that data center and the energy and the networking and all of that, which is a long lead time. Some of them are 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. So you better secure that ahead of time if you want to make any sort of noise in the space, especially large organizations.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good input, because like somebody want to do it in the next 1 or 2 years, they should start right now. Okay.
Yeah, they have to start right now. They cannot wait.
Right. So what I understood is it's still like human in the loop. We are not yet ready for like fully autonomous systems. And also the government is not ready with the regulations. Even though we talk about EU's AI policies, FDA is coming up with some AI policies and all that. But who is responsible? Like whether it is the AI company who is responsible, whether it's a physician or whether it is the healthcare organization, nobody has figured it out yet. So I think in the regulatory space also, like we need more clarity that should come in before we get a complete picture, right?
At least from the healthcare, I've seen the FDA starting to shift. There is a lot of guidance, draft guidance now that FDA has for good machine learning practices. People should look at the software as a medical device, especially how AI is governed and how the FDA sees the machine learning, large language models, generative, agentic, and what type of risk precaution they could take in the design, especially in the usability. That's very key. But definitely, I think Europe is maybe a little bit ahead, but FDA and the US are catching up. But definitely, because the technology is moving so fast, the government and the standards and organizations are slow, but I think they're going to start catching up.
Okay. In the interest of time, a concluding statement about the agentic or the maturity of agentic AI in healthcare and physical.
I think one thing I would say is I am truly interested in quantum computing, which is kind of like I think it will power the AI to the next level because of the compute, sort of power that it's going to give to the existing AI infrastructure. And I think the other aspect that is critical is energy. How do we solve the energy conundrum, especially with all these electric vehicles? Everything is going electric. How do we the resources are still limited to how to generate and power this grid and power the GPUs that are providing this service. I think those are the two things that I would, provide as key takeaways.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks, Steven, David. I think you guys were dot on time, keeping the 30 minutes. So thank you for that. And, as we evolve, AI is a buzzword all over. There's a lot of POCs that get burned at POCs, but I think you guys, having lived the real world life of moving projects to actually beyond POC, that's been a lot of real insight that we've heard. One input I had for the folks on the call. We have an option to send out your questions through Q&A. So as these questions come in, I would request Shivan to probably jump in and if we can have these questions shared with David. So Shivan, do you want
Yeah,
me to take the questions?
yeah. Please, David, you can see the Q&A session, right?
Let me
There
see.
are some questions in Q&A.
Okay, let me see. I'm trying to see where that is. Okay, looks like there are 3 questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first question is, how can healthcare organizations realistically assess where they stand on the AI maturity curve? What are the key indicators of moving from traditional AI to agentic or physical AI? I think that healthcare organizations, whether they're in US, India, Europe, Middle East, the key aspect is where, in order for AI to work, you got to have the data in a form that can be consumed by AI, right? So the maturity curve lines along the fact as to how good is the understanding of the executive team, and that's where the assessment will happen, whether it is within the company or they seek a vendor. Obviously, Worldwide is very, very experienced in this space, and we do maybe hundreds of executive meetings where we call briefings, where we understand and assess the maturity curve, and it goes all the way from experimental to transformational, right? And in the middle of that is operational and things of that nature. But the questions as where's the data, how good is the data, how formulated is the data, how is your governance, what are you doing in AI today? Have you done some use cases? Are you just starting? Do you have infrastructure to support it? Things of that nature. That's what you have to ask. And then once the maturity is understood, then the discussion starts to happen as to what are they wanting to do in terms of agentic or physical, because those are just executions of what the tech stack is and what the budget is and the teams that need to move it and then execute it, right, with a timeline. Does that help
Thanks,
answer
David.
the question? Or
Yeah, I think you're
absolutely.
spot on.
okay.
You can go to the next question.
Okay, the next one is healthcare is struggling on budgets while overheads are high in this context, other than for the major health systems. How is the medium and small practice adopting AI, considering the technology adoption cost and the compute cost ongoing, right? So again, it's a matter of budget, but it's also a matter of what is your ROI, right? What are you trying to improve as a small organization? Large organizations obviously have budgets, but still you have to be extremely focused as to what are you solving and why are you using AI and where are you helping, right? For example, a quick thing like, ambient listening could be great for a smaller organization, because then it reduces the physician wanting to write all these notes after their talk with the patient, right? A lot of the times that's where a big burnout is. And if you can help resolve that burnout, that's great, So that's a simple sort of a straightforward AI that they can start with and see what the ROI looks like. Are they really reducing the hours? Are they getting the cost out of it that they put in? And the other one could be like claims management, being able to search for keywords and coding, things of that nature. For smaller organizations, those could be good starting points. And also working with vendors, in these spaces to do things like cancer research, for laboratories, smaller clinics that need admin support, things of that nature, where Agentic could really help manage the patient workload, optimize the utilization of the physicians, things of that nature. I think those are where the medium and small practices could use AI. whereas large organizations are much more interested in the big picture, solving large strategic problems, chronic conditions, improving their, let's say, digital pathology needs, or looking at genetic dispositions, things of that nature, where you're looking at the precision health and things of that nature. So I would say that's how the budgets have to be equated, primarily with the use case and ROI.
Thanks, David. I think
Again,
they're pretty
yeah.
tangible, very tangible ROI elements that are
Yeah.
key for SMEs. That's, I think,
Exactly.
the key that you brought up.
Yeah.
The others
Exactly.
have a longer turnaround time to get the ROI, but SMEs would really need to see that in that short time span, probably
Yeah.
months rather than years to get the money
Yeah.
back. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is
Thanks
one
for
more
that.
question on, there is one more question on ROI
Okay.
from Jishnu.
How do you measure ROI or clinical value when justifying AI investments in early stage maturity levels, right? And so in that, the measure of ROI, let's take an example, right? Let's say you're trying to improve your labor costs, right? So you have only so many physicians and admins and nurses. So you want to make sure that they're not spending time on something that may not be critical, and it can be fairly automated or made into an agentic or a physical AI, or even a generative AI for that matter, right? So what you would do is you would say, okay, given the amount of time my nurse is spending documenting a report, or my physician looking at a patient, whereas maybe they could do a pre-scan of their CT, X-ray, MR, their pre-reports, and develop a generative AI-based summarization and give a longitudinal record, right? One of the companies that we work together, Sivakumar, was about improving that timeliness, right? By getting a bigger picture of their health. Because if a physician is seeing 10 to 15 or 20 patients a day, they're going through it quick. And if the AI can support that, great. That means that instead of me spending in 30 minutes, I only need to spend 5 minutes because the AI is able to give me that high level summary. Great. So that is a reduction, which then adds to the ROI calculation, right? Another one I would say is, let's say there's large organizations that have internal software development teams that are developing software for their interfaces, right? Maybe they can use a coding assistant, right? And the coding assistant will provide largely prefabricated code stacks that can solve a problem, develop the UI, things of that nature, right? Again, I'm talking for large organizations that have a software development arm for some of the applications that are not, purchasable from vendors. I know that in the US, Advocate, SSM Health, Ascension, Mercy. These are some of the things in St. Louis, as well as Kaiser. They all spend a lot of money on it. So anything to help improve the ideation phase of it, initial prototyping of it, great. That's how you look at ROI. Hopefully, I'm making sense. And then you don't pick large projects. You pick small projects, and then you have a flywheel effect, because once you get comfortable in an initial project, 2 projects, 3 projects, then you prioritize, and then you start to gain the maturity to do larger projects. That's where the real value comes in.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
What else?
There's a couple of more questions. Can you?
I see that. I'm a data analyst intern in healthcare. We don't have the data yet, as a hospital is still in construction. Meanwhile, we're aiming to become industry leader in terms of use of the tech in healthcare. So where can I start? As I want to use my expertise to lay the groundwork on where we can use AI. So I think, because you don't have a data in a consumable manner, you have to focus first on your data foundation layer before you want to focus on any models. But you may want to work with the executives in your team, especially if it's a brand new hospital, you have a pretty big canvas as to where you want to focus in. And again, depending on your budget, where your healthcare hospital is trying to focus, what do they do their work on, right? Clinically speaking, again, like I said, usually hospitals are broken into the clinical side, operational side, administrative side, and the technology side, right? So where is it that you can bring the biggest bang for the buck? Where are you situated? Are you in the US, India? Again, how do you get access to these compute resources, right? You got to look at the big picture. So best thing would be is suggest to the executive team to bring in outside consultants like Worldwide. Obviously, there are many others, but bring in a consultant at least to get an idea how to start and get a framework. Obviously, your other places go to ChatGPT and see what comes out of it based on your particular use case. Are you in the radiology side? Are you in the cardiology side? Are you in gastroenterology? Are you just a regular family care practice? There's so many things you can look at. And from a data standpoint, I would say that how do you make something that is not electronic into electronic? You have to put in the systems and you have to put the legwork in. Initially, you want to bring in people that can document all of this. But then once you have an idea of the manual aspects of how this information comes in, then you can look at how to automate that, or how do you bring in sensors or things of nature. Like in US, everything is electronic, right? Your imaging, your ECG data, your prescriptions, your your admission to hospital, your discharge, all of these are handled through EHRs, through picture archival systems, to your ultrasound machines, your X-ray machines, your CT machines. All of these things are electronic and connected via a network. So you need to have that groundwork laid out before you can jump into AI, and that's kind of the bottom line. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, David, one question on that line, just so take that thought a little forward. There's a lot of use of synthetic data that people try and, piggy ride
Yeah.
before actual data comes in. So, how does that really play into this, in the specific context where they have, zero data in place? Leveraging synthetic data, especially in a healthcare context, is that even acceptable?
Yeah, I think you can to a certain degree, right? So there are organizations, one of them, I think it's called OneMedNet. There are many other organizations that provide validated clinical data. So that means it's real data, but it's anonymized so that you don't have the demographics or anything that's critical to identifying the patient, right? So you can do that. Nvidia has a big stack of synthetic data generation process. So, but you have to provide it some sort of groundwork to say, this is the pattern of the synthetic data. It could be HL7 data. It could be other EHR data. It could be prescription data. It could be genetic data. There's so many different types of healthcare data that you can synthesize. But at the end of the day, if you're generally looking at just performance, you can synthesize to a more varied aspect. But if you're trying to do clinical assessments, like let's say you're implementing a blood pressure protocol, you need to have a clinical validity of that data, so that when you're doing your ground truth comparison, right, you need to ensure that the data makes sense clinically speaking. Okay. So I think that is very important. But I think a lot of companies, whether they are big vendors or small vendors, I would say before you get into clinical trials or anything of that, synthetic data would be great. But also there's two levels of synthetic. One is non-clinically validated, just for the purposes of, hey, I just want to see a prescription data. I just want to see an image. It doesn't have to be clinically valid, all the way to, okay, I'm assessing a model, like a Vista 3D that Nvidia has that does segmentation. You need to ensure that your anatomical MRI or scan is clinically valid in order to see that the segmentation is correct, right? So I think that's kind of where I would say that that comes in.
Sure. There are more questions
Does
coming
that make
in,
sense,
but
Renish?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, no, it makes sense. No, I was just trying to look into the questions stream that's coming
Sure.
in, because I had more questions on that same thought,
Mm-hmm.
because there is also an aspect of regional demographics that will come into play when you have the synthetic data, or
Yeah.
standardized anonymized data that you pick up. How does, if you're really targeting a geography, then it becomes a little gray area.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have worked with leaders in the cardiology space, both in the US at the highest level as well as India. And it's very different, right? The volume of patients that an Indian physician or cardiologist sees is 10 times the amount of physicians that a US physician sees. So there's a volume differentiation. The technology that a cardiologist in the US, they have 4 different cardiac mapping systems in a single lab that they can use for different tools. So it's like a Swiss Army knife, whereas in the Indian hospitals, it's just one knife. That's it, and you got to process it through. So there are different aspects of regional demographics, the type of issues that a patient in India faces versus a patient in US in terms of the diagnostics, the early detection of a problem, right? Things of that nature, and the type of reliability in the healthcare system, as well as the notes, clinical notes. So I think there's a lot of things that are different between how I want to synthetically generate a data for a patient in India or Middle East or Europe versus a patient in the US. The other side of the coin you look at is precision health, right? So how are you designing your models and your large language models? How are you tuning for a US patient where the food, what they eat, how they eat is very different than a nutrition available in Japan or India or Hong Kong or Europe, Germany, wherever, right? So I think that's where there's so much aspects and dimensionality to how you want to generate synthetic data and for what purpose.
Right. Thank you. I think that
Mhm.
was very clear. We've got more questions coming in, but in interest of
Yeah.
time, do you want to pick up any
Yeah.
of those questions that since we're
Let
almost out of
me
time?
look at this. I think the 2 questions were integration challenges, and then I think how are agentic AI models being trained? Again, I think it's a very good question. Let me focus on the Vinicius question first. I think part of what makes model context protocol exciting, and if people read through it, it's about giving context, right? So a lot of the pre-model context era, which is not far back, you would have to give that context manually. If you're chatting with ChatGPT and you're asking a problem, and then you're saying, well, you know what, just a few months back, this was the context around how, let's say I'm solving a robotic challenge, or I'm solving a healthcare workforce challenge, or a natural language processing challenge, right? You're giving it context, right? You're giving it a use case background, a particular industry vertical. Is that NLP and finance, healthcare? It's varied, right? Let's say in finance, you're looking at fraud detection as an example. What type of fraud schemes are you seeing, right? And where was it at? So you're giving it context. And so with the model context, that now becomes easy, right? And now Google bringing in A2A, the A2A gives the ability for the agents first to be distributed and to have different, like, think about a team like you, me, Sivakumar, different angles, different experiences. Maybe you have sales, I have a healthcare, IT, Sivakumar has a CEO, he has a thing. We all come from different angles. So we are reasoning with each other about an issue.
Right.
And that reasoning is what makes Agentic successful, right? It's able to reason, and you'll see the reasoning aspect of it really come to fore. And the way the Agentic works is that, whether it's Meta, whether it's Google GCP, or whether it's, AWS Bedrock, everybody thinks they solve the context problem, but that is coming to become a key aspect of the engineering. So once you're able to give the context and the variety of context, which is how our brain thinks in the first place, right? We have over our course of life have built a context which allows us to go back and forth very quickly to then spell out a solution. And so I think definitely human in the loop is still important, because you want to make sure there's an escape clause, right? No matter what.
Right.
You know, so you want to have some sort of approval process for more critical decision making. So I think that's going to be critical in how agentic kind of plays. Obviously, Google is leading the charge. They have recently made it open source, the agentic with the A2A, which is exciting. So I think that's one. And then quickly want to add into the integration, interoperability is going to be key, right? As these models become more what you call as commodity, right? Generative AI has become commodity. Now you're starting to go to agentic, which is not. And you know, you have vendors all the way, everybody has solved the problem, but really not, right? You know, you have to read between the lines. You know, even large companies, they provide a certain level of tech stack, but a true engineer that really understands the space, understands how to connect the dots, will they look at the interoperability element of it? You know, because it's not just a model, right? The model has to work with the compute. It has to work with the RAG. It has to work with the vector database. It has to work with the UI. It has to work with multiple models. It has to be flexible to change. So all of these things are part of the interoperability aspect of how you drive a solution. And that's where the Foundry comes in, right? But then once you have the Foundry where you have the formula, then you have to say, how do I scale this, right? So that's kind of where that becomes key.
Thanks, David. Again, we will try and get a copy of this recording to all the participants, and some of the questions that we couldn't address on the call, we will send offline answers personally to them. Some of these we'll try and document and send it along with the Q&A. The questions will be sent back to the team, to the participants. Shivan, any closing comments from your side, and David, so that we can close out the call? We are a little over time already.
Yeah. Thanks, David, for the insightful presentation, the answers that you gave. I'm sure that the participants will take away a lot of new things, especially on how to implement AI in their organization, what that data maturity is, what the future will look like. So thank you very much for your time, sharing your experience, expertise in the webinar. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and you know, I look forward to the future of AI. So,
okay.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen.
bye, everyone.
Thank you all for taking part.
Thank you all.